Hey everyone, welcome to my next tutorial. In this one we're going to create a fun little design here using Oxygen Builder, and I'm going to do this using what I'd call vanilla Oxygen Builder. I don't need any add-ons to do this, and we're doing this without using JavaScript or anything like that. So we're just going to be using HTML and CSS within Oxygen Builder. And what we're going to be doing is making this section right here. So I just pulled in some demo data from one of the Oxygen sites here. And all I'm doing is showing you guys a new way to do this exact type of thing, but just a different design. So down here you see I have a row of 3 different things. And if I hover over one of them, here you're going to see that my heading goes away and my text reveals, and then my icon background changes color on hover. And you'll notice that no matter where I hover in here, it's doing that. I don't have to hover over a specific spot on each one. And you'll see that works on each one of these. So let's go ahead and jump right into Oxygen Builder and get started on building this out. All right, so here we are in the back end of my design here, and I'm just gonna add a section right after my featured row here. Again, you can add that wherever you see fit. So I'm going to add in a section here, and then I'm going to add in a div behind that, and then I'm going to add one more div right away. Let me open up my structure here so we can see what we have here. And then to start, I'm just going to add one of our items, and then we'll duplicate it as we go here. So I'm going to do an icon. I'm going to do a heading, and I'm going to do text. And all I'm going to do is just copy and paste my first one down here. All right, now that we got that in there, I'm going to change my icon on this one. And for that, we want the bolt on that one. And we'll come back and do the next 2 in a little bit here. We're going to now go through and get it set up so that it's working. Now, I'm not going to touch any of the design on the actual IDs. I'm going to do everything with classes here besides on my actual section. So let's go ahead and start with that and work our way down. So I'm going to start on my section, and we're just going to style this out a little bit. I'm going to set it to vertical, which it is typically defaulted to. I'm going to do center. And we're going to give it some spacing as well. Let's jump over there and add some spacing here. You can see this has some default in there. I'm just going to change this to M units. So I'm going to do 2.5 M. If you click in here again, you can do apply all. And then I'm just going to take out on the sides here, I'm just going to have, it lets me do this, just 0.5. All right, perfect. That way we have a little bit of spacing around there as well. And then that should be good for our section. So let's move down one more to our next div down. And this one we are going to be setting as grid. And we're going to set our column count to 3 because we're going to have a total of 3 things. We can change our gap. I'm just going to do 10. I don't need a very big gap here. And I want to make sure I stretch my items for the alignment there. And then we'll make sure we choose stretch again here. All right. Next, I'm going to set some sizing and spacing on this. I want to do a width of 90% here, and I'm going to set a static height of 250. And you can see that gives us some nice room here. Next, I am going to jump over to the typography part, and I'm just going to center so we get everything centered here. And you can notice that some of it's not doing that, but we'll fix that as we go. All right. So we should be good on that one as well now, and we're going to jump down to our next div. In this one, I'm going to start by adding in a class. So in my case, I'm going to add in a class called FAB for features, advantages, and benefits dash hover, or HVR for hover. And that's what I'm going to do on my main div. And from here, we are going to set this to horizontal, middle, and then I want to set a width to 100%. So that's just going to take up 100% of that 1/3 of our grid area that we have. So we're not actually setting this to 33% because in our div above, it's already dividing this into a third here. All right, so let's keep moving along here. I'm now going to jump over to my layout because I have a few more things I need to do in there. We're going to scroll down in there, and we are going to set our overflow to hidden. And you'll see why we do that in a little bit. And then I'm also going to set our position to relative. And I don't need to set anything in here. All right, so that should be everything that we need to do within the div for right now. We are going to come back and do some things to that in a little bit here, but to start out with the class, that's going to be all we need to do at this point. Now I'm going to go to my icon, and we're going to start styling that. And again, I'm going to use a class to do all of this. The only thing I did within the icon is, or the ID of the icon is just change what icon I'm using. Everything else I'm going to be doing from my class. So we're going to be following that same thing. We're going to do FAB-HVR__icon. Go ahead and hit enter. And now we can start styling this. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to set a color on this. And I'm just going to use this grayish translucent, I believe. We might have to play with this a little bit to make sure it fits, because right now you can't see it, but we're going to be putting a background on that. My icon size I want to set to 55, and spacing we don't need to do anything, and icon style we don't need to do anything. So let's go to our background, and there we're going to set it to, I believe we're starting with our green color. Again, you can choose whatever it is that you want there. All right, so once you have the background on, we're going to jump down to our sizing. And here we're going to add a little bit of padding in there. So I'm just going to use pixels here and do that, apply it all the way around. And that just gives us some extra space around here. And actually, I'm going to go back here and to our primary, and I'm going to make this white. I think that'll stand out a little bit better than that gray. All right, perfect. So we got that. Let me jump back in here to my sizing and spacing because there are still some things we need to do. I'm going to set my width to 30%, and that's going to be because we're going to want the text and everything else to take up the other remaining 70%, but I do want a max width of 110 pixels just so it doesn't get too big. And I do want a height on here, which I'm going to do at 100. And actually it's supposed to be pixels. I apologize, not percentage. And then I'm going to have to come back and make sure we center this. So that just gives it a little bit more size here. Right. And we may even want to make sure that this is max width of 100, so it should be a perfect circle then. All right, so let's jump to our layout, and from our layout we can start setting that to be centered. So we're going to do flex, we're going to choose column, and then center and center. And you can see that puts it right into the center for us. Right. Next, we're going to jump down to our effects because we are going to be adding some hover effects here. So I just want to make sure that we have a nice transition on that. So I'm going to go to transition. I'm going to set this to 0.25 and we're going to do ease in out. And I'm going to do ease in out for everything on this just because it's a nice nice timing function. And in some cases you can set your CSS property for this. You could just say background color. If you only have one, it's not necessarily needed, but when we get a little bit farther through this, I'm going to be adding those in. So we'll be consistent and add that there. And that should be everything we need to do for the icon at this moment. You can see it's not hovering, but we're going to get to that. So next we're going to jump to our heading. And this is where we are going to also be adding a class, just like we did before, fab-hvr__, and I'm going to do title. And I want to set this to an H3 because we're assuming that we have a section title here, which is a H2. So I'm going to be using an H3. And in this case, I'm going to set my font size to a rem for my default. And I think 2.25 was a good size. Font weight, I'll do 600. And let's see here. I'm not going to change my color at all. I'm just going to leave that. And if I jump over to the actual typography, it gives us a little more options here. Let's see if there's anything else we wanted to do in here. I like doing uppercase. It makes it stand out a little bit nicer. So we'll do that, but everything else we should be good to go as far as the typography goes. So now let's do our sizing and spacing next. And here we're going to set a width of 70%. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that this is taking up 70% of our space. And we're going to set our height to 100%. And now you can see it's throwing it off a little bit there. So we may need to come back here and set our layout as well. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Jumping to our layout now, we can do like we did before, do flex. We're going to do column and center, and that should center everything for us. And next, let's see what we have. We're going to jump to our effects now. And just like we did before, we're going to be presetting some things. So I want to set my opacity to 1 to start here. And then we're going to be adding some transition. I'm going to do 0.5 this time, just because this I want to be a little bit slower as we get scrolling. We're going to do ease in out, as I mentioned earlier. And we want to be setting our CSS property to opacity and then transform. All right, so let's go ahead and set our transform now. So I'm going to click the back button here and come down to transform. And we're going to be setting this. So click add transform, and we want to translate. And right now, all I'm going to be setting this to is -1. So it's not really going to change at all, but I need a value here to bring it back from when we are no longer hovering it. I need to have a value in here for it to come back to. All right, so that should be everything we needed for our title. So let's jump over to our text. I just want to double check on my other screen, make sure I'm not forgetting anything here, and we should be good. All right. So now let's jump over to the text, And here I'm going to again add my class. So I'm going to do fab-hvr__text. And this I'm going to set my tag here to P. And this is going to come into play a little later, but just because it's text, I want to change that to our paragraph tag. I'm not going to change my font size or anything. I'm just going to leave that all as standard. Certainly you can change that as you see fit. So let's jump over to the Advanced tab. I'm going to click on my background, and we are going to set our background to white. And the reason I'm doing that is as we hover here, we want to make sure that we're not seeing our title through there as it translates. All right, next we're going to go to our sizing and spacing, and we're going to set our width to 70% again. And again, you're going to be seeing that it's not quite showing up properly, but you will see that change shortly here. And I am going to add a little bit of spacing to our left side here. I'm just going to do 1 rem here, and that just gives us a little space once our sizing gets a little bit smaller here. All right, let's jump down to layout next. And here we're going to want to be setting this as absolute for our position, and we're going to be setting our right to 0. So that just brings it back over to the right here. All right, perfect. Next, we're going to jump over to our effects. And just like we did before, we're going to add a few things here. So here we're going to take our opacity and we're going to set this to 0. So you can see it disappears now. And just like we had our title here taking up that 70% here. So now next I'm going to go to my transition and we're going to add that. Again, I'm going to do 0.5 here and my ease in out. And then I'm going to add my properties. So again, we're going to do opacity and transform, just like we did on the title. And now I can come over and we're going to add our transform now. And this one we are going to be doing a translate again. And this one we are going to set to -100%. And you can see that it's pushing that way up to the top here. And you can see as I was not paying attention here, I didn't actually fully add my class. So we managed to add all of that to our ID instead of our text block. So what I can do now is, if I have this open, if I click this little icon right here, it copies my styles and I can paste them to my class there instead of doing it all on the ID. So if I come back to my ID, I can go ahead and just remove everything I just did. I know it's kind of a pain in the butt, but you want to make sure that you are paying attention and not doing what I just did. That's what happens when you are talking and working at the same time. My apologies on that. It'll just take me a quick second to delete all of this out here. Right, and we should be good there. We still are on our P tag. Now back over to my class, you can see everything is still in there that we set. All right, perfect. And you can see nothing's happening when I'm hovering yet, but we are going to get there. So that should be everything we needed to get our initial items set up. And now the fun part is going to be animating this so we get everything moving here when we hover. So to do that, what I'm going to do is come up to our div that is holding all of these items here, and I'm going to be using our state up here, and we're going to be adding a custom state. And this is where things get a little bit tricky, but it's a fun way of being able to animate and create some transitions on things upon hover in our div. So we could set our hover effects on each item, but we would have to be hovering over those specific areas in order to do it. But by doing it this way that I'm showing you, anytime I'm hovering inside this box that is our div container, we're going to get that hover effect. So what I'm going to do for my very first one, I'm just going to paste this in there so I don't have to type it. I'm going to do hover, and you can add in the colon beforehand. If you don't, Oxygen does a good job of adding that in for you. So I have my hover and then a space, and I'm choosing my div, which is what an icon is shown as if we inspect it on the front end. And then I'm doing nth-of-type 1. So in this div, what it's doing is it's going to search for the nth of type, so div, and it's going to search for the first one. So in our case, there is only going to be one. Now, if there is multiple, you would want to target the very specific one that you're looking for. So let's say, in our case, if I did text instead of our heading, I would want to, if we did not change it to a p tag, it would be showing as a div. So I would do div number 2 in this case, because I'd have an icon which is showing as a div followed by another div. But in our case, I set our heading to be a heading, so that's showing as an h3 in our case, and then our text I set as a p tag, so that's going to be a p tag instead of a div as well. So in our case, we have hover, which means anytime we hover, we're going to target our div, which is the nth of type 1. So we're targeting our first div within this one. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and you can see that adds that in there. Now let's go ahead and style that out. So just pulling that up on my other screen here to make sure I have everything that I want. So I'm going to start on my advanced tab, and I'm going to choose my background. And since we started with their green, I'm just going to transition to our blue color here when we hover. So you can see now that when I hover anywhere in this box, I'm getting that to change. All right, perfect. And you can go ahead and add in a transition effect. You can see that it's already showing for me, but I like adding it to both just to make sure I have it. So before we did our 0.25, because we want that to be a little bit quicker, and we want ease in, out, and we chose our CSS property of background color. All right, so that should be everything we need for our icon. That one was very simple to do. So let's go ahead and add our next one, which is going to be our heading. So to do that, I'm just going to again click on my state up here and add state. And I'm just going to again paste this in here. So like I mentioned in my last one, we were doing our hover. We're targeting our H3, which is our heading, or in our case, our title that we're showing here. And again, we're going for the nth of type 1 because it's our first one that we want to target inside this div. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you can see I don't have the colon in here, but Oxygen automatically adds that in there regardless. And because we're just changing our state here, you can see that Oxygen doesn't change where you're located here. So if you need to get back to the main advanced tab or primary tab, you can just click on those to get there. So let's go ahead and continue to style that out. So to start, we are going to, I believe, just go down to our effects, and we're going to be adding in a opacity, and if we change that to 0, and we're going to add a transform, And this one we are going to set to translate and 100%. So a positive 100, which is going to push it down, as you can see here. All right, perfect. And you can see our other one's not coming in yet, but that's transitioning out nicely. All right, so let's see what we have next here. I believe that's going to be it for that one. And it is. So let's jump now to our text, getting that to work. So I'm going to just jump back here. So we're at that main advanced tab here. I'm going to add my state again, and I'm just going to copy that over. And this one, again, I'm doing hover. This time I'm using my p tag for paragraph, and I'm doing nth of type 1 again. Now again, if you have multiple types of that item inside your div that you're using this on, you will need to change that number from a 1 to a 2 or so on and so forth. But in my case, we only have one of each of these, so that's why I'm choosing just a 1 in here every time. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on this one. So we have that selected. I'm going to come down to my effects. I'm going to start with my opacity, and we are going to set that to 1. And then we're going to set our transform, and we're going to set that to translate. And this time we are going to bring that to positive 1. And now if we hover over this, you can see that comes into view as we hover, which is perfect. And you can see we have a little spacing here because as we start to do our responsiveness here, you'll see that things start to compact down a little bit more. So you can see no matter where I'm hovering inside this div, we're getting our hover effect, which is very nice. And you can play around with the speed, or if you wanted them to go up, you would just do the opposite of all the values that I've added for our translate. So that concludes each one of these. So now all I need to do is just go ahead and duplicate this div 2 more times. And this is where the fun part can be, is within my heading, you can see as I click out of here or hover on it, I'm not going to be able to get to my speed there for my title. So I'll start with this here, and we'll change that out, and I'll come down to this one, and I'll get that swapped out. And then I'm going to do my icons right away. Change this to, I believe it was server. Close enough. And let's do our last one, which was display. I always mess these up as I'm searching for them. There we go. Again, the icon in my case doesn't quite matter. I'm just trying to show you as an example. So I got those swapped out, and now the tricky part is getting my title because it's already moving on me. So certainly you can play around with that and potentially set them up beforehand, or if you're on a newer version of Oxygen or have some of the add-ons, you may have the ability to just edit the text over on the left here. I know up and coming in Oxygen 3.8, when that comes out as a stable version, they are going to be adding that to that, so it'll make it really easy to be able to just edit it over there in these cases. So in my case, all I'm going to do is on my heading for this one is I'm going to set my just change up my state here for a moment. So under my H3, I am going to come over here, click my effects, my transform, and I'm just going to set that to 1 for now. And my opacity, I'm going to set to 1. So now you can see that's still there. And it should, as long as I'm still hovered on that, and I might need to change my text there as well. So you can see this gets a little tricky as we go through this. And what I'll do is I'm just going to pause the recording here, get that done, and then we'll jump back in. All right, and we're back. So I got those swapped out. I didn't want to bore you with while I went through that, but you can see that when I hover here now, all of these are working and I have my different titles and my different text in there. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. All right, so we got that saved. Now let's go ahead and take a look on the front end. I'm going to hit refresh now, and you can see we have this here. So now let's go ahead and work on making this responsive. So I'm going to jump back over to my builder, and again, we're going to kind of work our way down. So let's start with our section, and as we start to play with this and trying our different sizing here, you can see that it starts to squeeze together here. I'm not going to actually need to do anything on the section, so let's go back up to full size there, and we'll move down to our next div. And from here, we're going to be setting our very first size, so our page container here, and I'm just going to set this to what we had before at 90%. I'm just going to set to 100%, just so it stretches back out so we get all that room back here. Next, I'm going to drop down to our less than 768, and we're going to make this stack now. So again, I'm going to choose grid, and we're just going to set this to 1. And you can see we do need to change our sizing as well here, because what I had done before is set that absolute sizing. So I'm going to have to fix that as well. So let's scroll back up and go to our sizing and spacing, and we'll have to play with this a little bit to see exactly what we need. So looks like if we set it to 500, that's enough. And you can see everything's fitting in here nicely and still working. All right, perfect. And let's drop down one more size to see how it looks here. Again, you can see that it has enough nice space there. We have just our little bit of spacing on the left and right hand side here from when we put that margin in before. So I'd say that looks pretty good there. So let's jump back up on each size here and see what it looks like. Again, here you can see it's still showing nicely here, and you can play around with the sizing as you need to. The reason I made this a little bit bigger is so that we had room when we get to these smaller sizes for the text to grow here up and down. So that should be good on that div. Let's take a look and see if we need to do anything else on any of our other sizes here. And I'm going to say that we're actually looking pretty good here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And I'm going to bring over another window here, which is just going to be in Google, just because it has a nice mobile inspect tool. So, all right, you can see that's here now. And I'm just going to right click, inspect, and we're going to choose mobile and take a look at this. So I'm going to just drag that off to a different screen because it doesn't matter here. And you can see as I'm on here, when it's showing as mobile within Google, you get the mobile touchscreen effect. So you can see as I hover over these, I'm not getting anything happening. But if I go ahead and just touch, you can see that it creates our hover effect. And if I go to my next one, it does the same thing. And if I just click off anywhere, it goes back regardless of where I'm clicked here. So you can see that looks pretty good. And if I choose just responsive here, as I make it a little bit bigger here, we get it changing around a little bit. Still looking like we're on a touch screen here. And as we get bigger, it continues to grow again. So I just wanted to show a quick, easy way to make a cool new design. It functions a little bit differently. And I managed to do this all within Oxygen Builder. I didn't need any extra add-ons in order to do this and did not need to know any extra JavaScript. Just added a little bit of custom CSS to target those specific items so that when we're hovering over, and again, I'll get out of the mobile view here so we can get that hover again. And you can see anytime I'm within that main div here, I'm getting my hover effect for each one of these. So again, we did that with that targeting within Oxygen, just on our state here using these as I mentioned. So just a cool different way to design something, and I hope you guys really enjoyed this. If you have questions, please let me know. I'll leave everything I can down in the description as well. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.